there is a 10-year journey, right? Not good, committed to the craft, working super hard, not knowing that I was going to end up on main stage. That wasn't like, that's my goal. My goal was just to get better. The bonus was the client realized, obviously, I had gotten better. The audience rewarded me for getting better by showing up to my breakout sessions, which then led them to say, we should put her on main stage because she's the highest rated, most popular non-Microsoft employee speaker on the tracks, right? 3 days, 100,000 people show up, and I was the most popular presentation. So that doesn't happen just happenstance, right? It's not an accident. You really have to work that muscle.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Speaking of Success, where we explore the world of public speaking. Today we have Tiffani Bova, a renowned business strategist and keynote speaker. With over 25 years of experience, Tiffani has driven growth and transformation for companies like Salesforce, Microsoft, Cisco, and IBM. Tiffani is also a 2 times Wall Street Journal bestselling author of Growth IQ and The Experience Mindset. Her thought leadership is recognized globally, including by Thinkers 50. She hosts the popular podcast What's Next and has captivated audiences with over 1,000 keynotes. Tiffani's unique insights on business transformation and customer experience are featured in top publications like Forbes and Harvard Business Review. Join me as we delve into her experiences and insights on the transformative power of being a great speaker and presenter. Tiffani, welcome. It's so good to have you here.
It's wonderful to be here, Spencer. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So we're here obviously to talk about public speaking and presenting skills, not just speaking on huge conferences like you've done, but also like you've done inside companies. And I thought it might be nice maybe to take you back in time to the beginning of your career, because I know you started out in sales. And where did you first start to think about the importance of the ability to speak well?
Boy, I don't know when it started. I just remember when I was really little, like, some of my friends' parents would be like, oh, please just stop talking. It was sort of the gift of gab. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, right? I mean, when you're little, it might, be a little more annoying than as an adult. But I always loved to tell stories and to communicate and find ways in which I could connect with people. And I don't know when that started, but I often joke everything I learned about business, I learned at the carnival, and people are like, wait, what? Okay, wait, stop. You can't just say that and then move on. But growing up in high school, one of my best friend's parents owned the outdoor carnivals, no animals. It was just rides and games. Yeah. And then indoor arcades back in the day when video games were like, in spaces, not on our phones or on our TVs. And I probably 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, like it was a crash course in everything to do with that kind of feeling you had to convey from everything, in a communication setting, right, to the employee. I was 16, like managing, and I put in air quotes, right, managing adults or making schedules or counting cash or picking teddy bears or all of those things. And so I really understood the power of communication in that. Those wouldn't be words I would have used back then, obviously. But in looking back, I can say it really shaped a lot of the ways that I think and approach business today, without a doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I'm hearing there also that you said yes to that opportunity. And I think that's also a big part of it. Can you remember, like, was there deliberation or was it, I'm definitely doing this?
I don't know if I said yes. I don't know.
You were volunteered.
Yeah, I think it was more that. I think it was a little bit of that. But I also think, like, just to be, really transparent here is my friend's mom, her name was Linda. She was like, running a multi-million-dollar business as a CEO. One of the only women, obviously, at that time that was doing those kinds of things. And she was one of the first presidents and members of YPO, the Young Presidents Organization, back in the early 80s. And so I had this role model in front of me, right? So I was kind of like, oh, I want to be that. And my mom was a school teacher. And I think the blend of the two was communication, school teacher, right? Influence and get people excited about things on education. And then the business side between the two of them, it was just an incredible opportunity. But when Linda was like, oh, if you're gonna be part of the family, right? Like you need to work. And I'm like, okay. And so I don't know if I said yes, but once I started doing it, I was hooked, right? It was just so much fun, and it was extra money, spending money in high school, which was fun. But it was also this very keen eye on what I wanted to be, if you will. And so any chance I got to sort of sponge information, while not fully aware of what that meant then, I think I accidentally did it. And it's really just been so much part of what I still do every day.
Yes, it feels like that there was a definite pathway to sales. So,
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely, and marketing and customer service, which is
yeah,
sort of three things. That's why I say everything I learned about business, I learned there, right? I was marketing to people who were under the age of 10, right? And their, needs and wants changed in a 3-second span. And, it was all about teddy bears, and it was hot, and it was dirty, and it was outdoors, and it was, chaos. And it was all those things that you have to learn. And the power of service and experience that really shaped what I, again, still talk about today. So I think you never realize early on, through your sort of teenage or childhood years, those lessons you learn that you may not know where and how you're going to apply them. But I was standing on a like a box, there's maybe 3 feet by 3 feet, maybe 3 feet tall, on a microphone, trying to get people to come and play the games. Well, that's intimidating, right? To stand up there and say something. Is it stupid? Do I look okay? Like, are people going to come over and play the game? And you just kind of wing it and have fun. And then I learned that, oh, I'm kind of good at this, right? And so then I tried to get better and better, and I, started testing jokes, and how could I have fun doing it? And again, I think that those things accidentally, gave me early experiences that I still am able to pull from today.
yes. It was nearly a career in stand-up comedy, but
Oh, definitely not. But definitely not. But you know what I mean? Like, hey, this teddy
yeah,
bear
yeah,
over here is lonely. You know what I mean? Like, how do you get people to want to come play and give their money? You have them a little captured, right? Because they're there. They made a choice to be there, so they're going to play games. So it wasn't so difficult versus if you were standing outside a retail establishment now and people are trying to get you to come in the store. That's very different. But that was a great environment.
yeah. So, uh, following on from that, like obviously college into the workplace, what's the next big moments that you remember from having to stand up and speak in front of people?
I think when I decided that, again, I don't think someone said, I think you'd be really good at sales. I think I realized I was really good at this thing called sales. And so once I realized that I could earn a living doing it, I think it was an interesting conversation. My mom spent a lot of money on my education. And I came home and I'm like, hey, mom, I think I'm going to go into sales. She was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, I've spent all this money on this education and you're going to go into sales? And I'm like, yeah, I think I'd be really good at it. I think I could make some money doing it. And I accidentally landed into technology super early. It was just an accident. It was a friend of mine who said, hey, will you help me do this? And I was like, okay. And I sort of learned what they were selling. And then I started selling. And then I found this great passion for technology, not as a technologist or an engineer, but more of the things it could do on the business side. And it was sort of off to the races. And in those early days, like I've been in tech now over 30 years, that imagine sitting in front of people trying to talk to them about what technology could do, pre cell phone, pre internet, pre everyone having 5 devices and cars being smart and everything being connected and digital. they would look at me like I would never do that. Like I remember a meeting specifically with one of the very large um, movie houses in Southern California and saying, "Hey, I want to sell you the domain name to your business." Right? Let's say, Warner Brothers or a Disney or a Universal Studios, think someone like that. And they go, we would never put our content or our IP on this thing called the World Wide Web. And look where we are now. Right.
Yeah.
So imagine trying to sell and tell stories and inspire people to go down this very unknown path of this, wait, what, very Jetsons, futuristic, 2050 kind of stuff. And, you had to just have great ability to get people to imagine what's possible.
Yeah. Oh, and what was some of the, I mean, you alluded to this anyway, but what were some of the challenges along the way? Obviously, you had technology that was hard to sell because people didn't get what it was going to be yet. But were there any other challenges along the way in terms of the ability to speak and persuade people?
I think, look, I've often said this, I happened to pick an industry which wasn't uh, full of very many people who look like me. There weren't many women in the room when I would be in the room. Like who was buying technology was not women. Who else was selling technology was kind of almost not women also. So I would say I used that to my advantage. Like I felt like if I could do a good job and add value and be a trusted advisor like others were, that they would remember, who I was because
Yeah.
I was not one of many, right? I was sort of one. It didn't give me a pass. I don't feel like I got jobs or got opportunities because I was a woman. And my own personal experience, I didn't feel I didn't get it because I was a woman. That wasn't it maybe I look, I'm not naive. I'm sure it happened. I just wasn't aware of it, or I wasn't paying attention to it, or really I just didn't care. I just
Yeah.
moved on and was like, I'll go find something else I can do or some other client I can sell to. So that was one, but not one that I like lean into heavily where that's part of my talk track or part of my story. It just happened to be the timing of things. Second, I would say that back then technology was very much, you'd show up and demonstrate what the technology could do, and so your storytelling ability in that demonstration process, I am not technical, so you had to sort of tell stories and dip in and out of the technology side of it because you had technologists in the room. And I would tell you that I learned very early on to not try to be a technologist. To if I was going to be an inch deep and a mile wide, I needed to qualify and quantify. Look, if you want to go deeper into the technology, I will bring in a sales engineer or a systems engineer that can really get into the technology. But I knew where my strengths and where my non strengths were, and so I think that was an early lesson. And then that really started to give me that opportunity to present, if you will, in front of more than one person, right? Because it was like a buying committee of 8 or 10 people. Now all of a sudden you started to understand, well, all of them have different hot buttons and different agendas and different pain points. Some of them will like what I'm saying, some of them won't. Now all of a sudden I had to start to learn to be very good at body language, listening, asking better questions. And that's very different than just standing in front of people and being confident in doing that. Now, all of a sudden, there was these other skills of asking questions, listening, body language, maneuvering a room full of people that all have an opinion. Like, how do you navigate that? That becomes a skill in and of itself. Even if you're a really good communicator and a good storyteller, if you don't have sort of control over the room, it doesn't matter how good you are, right? You will lose your ability to influence very, very quickly, and they probably will never ask you back.
Yeah, and that's a huge confidence lesson in terms of, that belief. I know for myself it was the same, like understanding or having a belief that, yeah, it's your stage, you own it, you're in control of this time at the moment, and it's a big lesson that you have to go through.
Well, I'll tell you that one. This is just one quick story. Is I went through the training, right? Here's the training on how to present, and how to give a demo. And here are the things you need to do. And I'm very literal. So I'm like, okay, step one, step two, step three, step four, step five. You know what I mean? Like, tell me. So one of my very first big presentations, it was like, Okay, step one, check. Step two, check. I had my 3-ring binder. I had everything I had to say. I followed the process to the T, and I bombed miserably, right? Because I wasn't doing what we were just talking about, right? Being able to respond to what was happening in the room and read the people and see what's landing, see what's not landing. You can kind of tell they're not understanding, or their arms cross and they're kind of checked out, or back then it wasn't getting on their phones, but maybe they start writing something else, or they're reading something, or they're on their laptop, and you know that you've sort of lost their attention. And I remember that very well, just as much as I remember one of my very first big keynotes being a bomb. And it was very similar. Like, it was very sort of scripted, and there was no personality, and I was just sort of doing and saying and behaving the way I thought I was supposed to do it, with very little emotion and personality. And while the audience might not have thought it was a bomb, when I looked back at the video after, I was like, wow, that was terrible. Right? So I always remind myself that it could be worse.
Yes, we've all done that. So obviously, like, fast forward a few years and you're on mega stages, you're on TV, you have books, yeah, the world totally changes. So was there a pivotal moment along the way where you suddenly felt things start to change, or what were the key moments that kind of led from when you first got your, like, head around sales to what eventually would become?
Yeah, look, I was an operator, right? So I was an individual quota carrying sales rep, and then I became a sales leader, and then I took over marketing, then I took over customer service. And so, I was an operator first, if you will. And then I left that operating role and I joined a company called Gartner, which is the world's largest analyst and consulting firm in tech specifically. And it was a complete culture shock, right? Like, I behaved one way, and then analysts sort of don't behave that way. Like, that's just and that was that transition of the very bad keynote. And that's really where my keynote career began, back in 2006. And so, I would say that that was a different journey for me. Now I had to find a voice, number one. But number two, you couldn't just be considered an expert. Like, you kind of had to earn your stripes. The market had to say, I was those things. I couldn't say I was those things. And that took me time. It took me about 2 years to kind of find my sea legs and find what am I, what are my areas of expertise? How do I communicate in a way that, lands? How can I influence executives at some of the largest technology companies in the world? How can I add value in there? That took me time. Once I started to see the response from the customers and the clients, I started to gain my confidence, and that was sort of the beginning of my shift, if you will, to becoming better at that kind of stage sort of presence and ability to communicate. But it was really people's words to me and saying, hey, listen, you're really good at taking complex ideas and boiling it down to actionable advice. So I often say, seeing the stars in the sky and seeing the Big Dipper,
Yeah.
where others are overwhelmed by the stars, and I very quickly could see the Big and Little Dipper, and I'm just like, okay, I got it. Like, here's how to move forward. Once they started telling me my superpowers, if you will, that's when I started doubling down on it. And I started to really hone my skill on being able to present complex in a very simplistic, easy to understand and digestible way that was actionable. And that took time, it took practice. And by the way, it took a full commitment to the craft, right? I couldn't just fake it. I had to really say, I am going to work hard to get better at what is now expected of me, and also what I expect of myself. And so there's a whole process of how to get better. But I think you need to wait and listen for the signals of what people value from you, where they think you have a unique ability or superpower, whatever words you want to use. And then how can you double click on that to use that as your competitive differentiation as an employee, right? And even potentially as a keynote speaker.
Yeah. And it kind of ties into, during that time, what were the kind of benefits or impact that you started to see for you personally, professionally, like building that skill? Because I think I can imagine people listening go, "Oh, sounds a bit scary doing that," and I'm not sure I can. But and so, did you already start to see, "Hey, I'm getting good at this thing, and it's opening doors for me"? It's what were the kind of impacts that you started to see?
Well, so I'm going to start that keynote I said that was horrible. It was a total bomb. I'll sort of give the story. It was maybe 6 months into my tenure at Gartner, and at the time I got hired in as a research director. Sort of it follows academia, so it's kind of at the beginning of the rung of the ladder, if you will.
Yeah,
I was there for 10 years, so this is year one, kind of month six. I'm speaking at Microsoft's Worldwide Partner Conference. My predecessor, whom was a friend of mine who had left Gartner to go to work at Microsoft, when he had already booked this particular slot. And so when I joined Gartner, he's like, "Hey, Tiffani, just backfill my slot. This is what I normally speak about, kind of a thing." And it was a topic I knew well. So I wasn't nervous about the topic, but I had never, if you will, given a presentation like that in front of, let's call it, maybe 750 people ish. It was probably that size,
yeah,
which,
a lot.
can be very It's big enough,
Definitely.
right?
Yeah,
It's big,
yeah.
it's big enough. So I'm at the podium. I've got my 3-ring binder. I'm very authoritative, right? And I'm saying what I'm saying, and I'm pointing at the slides, and I'm flipping the page, and I'm going through all this. And thankfully they recorded it. So then began my journey of, when I watched it back, I was like, "Ooh, I'm terrible." Like I wouldn't want to have to listen to myself for 40 minutes. It just was flat for me. Anyway, okay? So I then said, I want to get better, as I just said a few minutes ago. So here is my trick that I will impart on you is I do two things for myself and then others. One, I would listen to my keynotes that were recorded for me, and I would not watch them. I would listen for pace, tone, when I would lean in to say something, when I would talk really fast, or when I would really slow it down to make a point, change my voice, those kinds of things, right? So just listen, not watch. Then I would watch and not listen. So was I too much with my hands? Were my hands in my pocket? Was I fussing with my hair? Was I playing with the mic? Was I distracting? Was I pacing on stage? Again, watching, not listening. Then I would watch people who engaged me. So it could be an interview that a newscaster would do, or it was a TED talk, or it was a keynote that I watched, that someone else gave, and I could watch it back. It would be someone like that's really an orator. So someone like an Oprah or a Barack Obama, very orator more than keynote speaker, right? I didn't want to be an orator because that's sort of not my who I am, but I their pace and the way they would accentuate certain thoughts or words that I could sort of, try to assimilate and make as part of mine. Over time, literally, not kidding, every single time for almost the first 3 or 4 years of me being an analyst, I would get copies of my keynotes and I would do that exercise and I would watch people and I would stop doing things. I'd stop pacing or I'd stop, I'd get away from being behind the podium. I would only use a lav, not a handheld. Like I started like understanding where I would, if you will, perform better. And I would learn and I would constantly be striving to hone my craft, right? Because if this is what I was going to do, I wanted to be the best I could be at it. So I was committed to it. And all the way until about year 8, and still now, I will still do it. Every once in a while, I'll be like, oh, I got a copy of a recording of a keynote. I will do the exercise and be like, always looking for ways to improve, right? Or I said something that was funny. It got a laugh in the US. It did not get a laugh in Europe. Okay. So, or it did not get a laugh in Asia Pacific. So, okay, don't forget that you have to remember American isms or US isms not to use internationally, like little things like that to get better and better. Okay. So, first one, total bomb, 700 people in the room. The very last keynote I gave at Gartner, I had then made my way to research fellow, which was sort of the top of the pile. There was only about a dozen of us out of about 1,200 analysts. And that was because of the impact I'd had on clients and the business. But now my very last public keynote was for Microsoft again. It was in the round and it was in front of about 15,000 people at the Verizon Center in DC. And so there is the journey, right? Really bad, 700 people to getting better, getting better, getting better. And by the way, I did the Microsoft event 10 years running. I only had one session that first year. By the time I ended, I was doing 6 or 7 or 8 sessions of the same presentation because it was so popular. And then I landed on main stage. And then I did Steve Ballmer, the former CEO of Microsoft's final public interview. He asked for me by name specifically to give him that last interview at a Gartner event, Gartner Symposium event in Florida. So there is a 10-year journey, right? Not good, committed to the craft, working super hard, not knowing that I was going to end up on main stage. That wasn't like, that's my goal. My goal was just to get better. The bonus was the client realized, obviously, I had gotten better. The audience rewarded me for getting better by showing up to my breakout sessions, which then led them to say, we should put her on main stage because she's the highest rated, most popular non-Microsoft employee speaker on the tracks, right? 3 days, 100,000 people show up, and I was the most popular presentation. So that doesn't happen just happenstance, right? It's not an accident. You really have to work that muscle, if you
Yeah,
will.
definitely. And I think it's great advice and information for people to know, because it's like any other skill. You can't pick it up in one day, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. You just keep learning, keep iterating, keep going better and better and better and better. So I think it's and it also shows you that the more that you do and the more that you care about the audience and what the impact is going to be on them, that then they remember you because you impacted them, because you made them change the way they think or change the way they feel about something. So
Yeah,
it's
and good or
definitely
bad. Like,
sure.
I'm
Yeah,
always like if I got them to completely flat out disagree with me and say it, still a success for me, right?
yeah,
Because they were listening, they disagreed, perfect, awesome, right? And I would actually ask people back then to give me feedback on the presentation because usually they wanted a copy of the deck, and so it was a little quid pro quo, right? I'd be like, "I'll give you the deck if you give me feedback on the presentation,"
yeah,
like not me, the presentation. So like, what stood out? What didn't? What did you agree with? What didn't you agree with? Like, I was pretty prescriptive. So now what that did for me was I'd probably get 20% of the audience, no matter how big, would actually send me an email, and it would help me adjust what I say next time. Like, boy, collectively, people don't, they think that slide's too busy, or it didn't really make sense, or they gave me an example of when something happened or something they did. Now all of a sudden I had a new story to share the next time. And so I got a reputation of having a pulse on the business. And the way I kept that pulse was all that feedback all the time and being open to it and adjusting. Just winging it doesn't work, but being prescriptively prepared and having verbatim notes of what you're going to say also doesn't work.
yeah,
So the two sides of that extreme, you need to find your happy middle, if you will, medium, where it's not completely, you don't know what you're going to do, and it's not totally scripted. You have an idea of the story arc, right? You have an idea of what you're going to say, when and where, and when you're going to click, and what you have on the slides. But you need to have a little bit more than just that.
yeah, definitely. So you step off that stage. Was it 17,000 people,
15.
Verizon,
Yeah.
15,000 people?
Yep.
What happens next?
It was
Where did you?
awesome, right?
Yeah,
And it was in the round. So, it was a round stage, kind of like if it was a rock concert, right? It was a
yeah,
round
yeah,
stage. And so everybody was versus it being a stage at the front, you know? So I'd never done it in the round before. You can't just go in a circle.
yeah,
So like I literally they worked with me on how to work the stage because I'd never done a round before. So again, after a decade, after, probably 250 keynotes, if not more, over the course of that decade, it's probably closer to 400. At that point, I still had never done it in the round. So something to learn, right? Then we had very specific messaging that I needed to communicate in the first like 3 to 4 minutes. Um, and what's interesting is people who know me, I had them watch the presentation. They're like, boy, you seemed awfully nervous in the first couple of minutes. And then you kind of loosened up and became yourself. And that's not what it was. I wasn't, I mean, it's not that I wasn't nervous, but it was because I was scripted. And the
Yeah.
second I got out of the script, my whole body language, I got
Yeah.
looser. I was telling stories and jokes. And, where at the beginning I was like, almost like that first presentation. Okay, I have to say these six things. I need to say it like this. I need to click here. I need to do that. It showed me that whenever I was scripted, and maybe now it's a, it's a, it's something I don't like doing because I feel like I can't be myself if it's heavily scripted. So I have to find a way to make it my own if it's scripted. But that was a great example of, even after all that, I found I was not good in doing those two things simultaneously. And then I had to learn how to navigate around stage.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So I'm conscious of time, and I'm imagining somebody who is just starting out, or they've decided, hey, I want to get better at this thing. Where should they start? What can they do?
Yeah, so I'm going to steal something from my friend Seth Godin. If you don't know
Oh,
who Seth is,
I didn't know exactly who Seth is. Yeah.
if you're listening and you don't, just check him out.
Yeah.
Anything you ever want to know about marketing or being a great human being, Seth's your guy. I've known him for almost 25 years now. So he gave me the cover quote on my first book. So he is one of my favorite people. But I would say to you that I asked Seth this very question when I was at Salesforce, and we were doing a webinar together, and it was about marketing. And I said, okay, people are listening to this and watching this, and they're just beginning their marketing career. What would you recommend to them? Very similar to what you just asked me. So I'm just going to borrow what he said. Go market. So I'd say go speak. And he said, market for your PTA, your kids' soccer team, for your church, whatever. So go speak at the PTA conference. Go speak at your local community center, or if you want to get into politics or whatever it is, right, just go and speak. Even if it's two or three people or in your team meeting, or ask your manager, hey, I want to present something, right? It's just that you have to go do it.
Yeah.
And early you're going to do it for free, right? Because it's kind of like marketing for free, right? Well, I've never done a campaign on Instagram. Okay, well, if I want to become a marketer or a social media manager, I need to go do it. Well, I'm just going to go try it. I'll try it for myself, and then maybe I'll try it for a friend, and then I'll learn, and then I can start charging for it, right? I mean, it's just a matter of, you have to try it. So I would say go do it in whatever venue or opportunity you have. But it could be, like I said, church, school, something with your kids, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts meeting, whatever it is. Just go out and start to speak. And when I say that, I don't mean like you have to go up there and talk for 20 minutes, but maybe it's you want to run the fundraiser for your kids' soccer team. And so you need to talk to all the parents, and you get them together after the game, and you stand up there and say, okay, here's the fundraiser. Here's what we're trying to do. That is a great example. That could be a meeting at work. You're trying to go for budget. Well, you're just trying to fundraise for your kids. Kind of similar, right? You
Yeah.
need people to say yes from your kids, parents, and you need people to say yes at work. And then what's the ROI of the money they're giving you, and what's the return, and how much work has to happen, and who's doing what? It's very similar, right? And so if you can't convince your kids other parents, soccer kids parents, to donate or work the lemonade stand or raise money or whatever, then you have to keep sort of working on the skills. You're never going to always get a yes or always raise all the money, but it's just an opportunity for you to find your way forward.
Yeah. Fantastic. Great advice. So where can people find you? Where can people connect with you? Where should they go?
So you can go to my website, tiffanibova.com. I've got a podcast called What's Next with Tiffani Bova. My first book was Growth IQ. My second book is The Experience Mindset, and I'm pretty active on social. You can follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram as well.
Yeah. And I'll put all of the links to all of those below the video so people can get to them easily.
Excellent. Well,
So
thank you, Spencer.
you're welcome. Thank you so much for sharing some of your story and experience. There's a lot of value there for people.